paper that I am about to read forms a very small part of a much larger ERC-funded project that addresses youth engagement in the preservation of minority and regional European languages. The Irish Language Summer College represents a distinct approach to minority language preservation in a European context. It has been a rite of passage for juveniles or adolescents, teenagers or youths since the first college was established in County Cork in 1904. Every summer, approximately 25,000 Irish teenagers spend 3 weeks immersed in the Irish language in over 30 designated colleges, and they reside with Irish-speaking families in over 600 houses, and the expenditure is currently worth over 50 million to the Irish economy. The colleges are overseen by the Irish Government's Department of Education, and they supplement the Irish language school curriculum. The Irish language is a compulsory subject at both primary and secondary school level in the Republic of Ireland. My paper will focus on the early years of the Irish Language Summer College, tracing its evolution. It will address the extent to which Irish colleges served as breeding grounds for nationalism in the period leading up to Irish independence in 1922. It's important to note that the Irish language is not always bound up with nationalism nor Catholicism for that matter, but during the first 2 decades of the 20th century, it certainly was bound up with both cultural and political nationalism. This paper will provide an insight into how school teachers and juveniles, as they were called then, were schooled in Irish nationalism during their summer holidays, with many of these people spreading nationalist ideology further. Teachers returned to their classrooms where they could disseminate nationalist ideology, for example. Several of the juveniles and teachers in attendance at Irish language summer colleges proceeded to become prominent 20th century politicians and writers. I think it's important to set the Irish language summer colleges in their historical context. They came about during the period known as the Irish Revival. This involved a shift away from parliamentary politics in favour of cultural nationalism, which included a renewed interest in literature in both Irish and English languages, in the Irish language, in Irish sport, dance, music, etc. This period of cultural nationalism was not unique to Ireland. It was also happening in other Celtic regions, Wales, Scotland, Brittany, Cornwall, and beyond. When the Irish language summer colleges were established, the Irish language had been in dramatic decline for over 60 years. The Great Famine in the 1840s had decimated the number of Irish speakers, and many Irish people who survived the famine wanted their children to be English speakers, as English was the only language of use to them if they emigrated. Added to this, the Irish language and Irish history were left out of the national school curriculum of 1831, which resulted in native Irish-speaking children receiving the entirety of their education through the medium of English, which they didn't understand very often. At the same time, Irish children who were native speakers of English had no access to the Irish language. Scholar Tom Walsh sums up the decision to cut the Irish language out of the national school curriculum, stating that the British authorities wished the education system to act as an agent of civilization, socialization, assimilation, politicization, and the reproduction of colonial values with a view to making Ireland more governable. When the Irish Revival came about at the turn of the 20th century, one of the central aims of its proponents was to ensure that the Irish language would become a key subject on the national school curriculum, thereby reintroducing children to the language from which they had been severed. The Irish language summer colleges were in many respects an interim measure. They were established to teach the Irish language to young people and teachers during a period when the Irish language had not yet achieved equal status within the national school curriculum, and when the official teacher training colleges in Ireland were not providing sufficient resources to facilitate the teaching of the Irish language. The organisation that spearheaded the campaign known as the Language Battle in the Educational System was called the Gaelic League. What was visible to all members of Gaelic League, if not always openly acknowledged, was the centrality of the London branch of the Gaelic League to the development of the Irish language movement and the ideas and the money it brought in. Indeed, many of the initiatives of the London branch of the Gaelic League came from the experience of living in England rather than through links with Irish culture. Perhaps the finest example of English culture's influence on the Gaelic League was the children's division of the London Gaelic League. The children's division spurred the production of Irish language children's literature and drama, and perhaps most influentially in the long term, the idea of sending groups of children to an Irish-speaking region on their summer holidays. By the turn of the 20th century, several social campaigners and charities in London had decided that poor city children should be sent on holidays to rural areas where they could benefit from fresh air, open spaces, good food, and leisure time. Apart from benefiting the health of the children, this idea furthered the sense that childhood should be a time for instruction and enjoyment and cut off from the working world of adults. After all, children who were on summer holidays could not be members of the workforce at the same time. The most notable London-based holiday charity at the time was the Children's Country Holiday Fund, which dated back to the year 1884. By 1912, over 46,000 city children were being sent to for a summer holiday to the countryside or seaside on an annual basis with the help of this fund, and parents were expected to contribute to the cost whenever possible. Members of the London Gaelic League adopted the same approach on a tiny scale in the first decade of the 20th century by sending a group of London children to rural Ireland every summer. Along with benefits from fresh air to leisure time, these children would learn the Irish language and become immersed in Irish culture. The London Gaelic League had been involved in summer school projects since the turn of the century and played a role in establishing the first official Irish language summer college in 1904, which was aimed at adults, particularly teachers, after which such colleges mushroomed throughout Ireland. In 1908, the London Gaelic League first organised a scheme of sending children to Irish language summer colleges, a time at which there were at least 450 children attending the classes organised by the London Gaelic League. The 9 best young speakers of Irish in an exam conducted by the Gaelic League were sent off to an Irish-speaking part of Ireland for a fortnight's holiday each summer, which was known as the Children's Holiday Prize. The children were sent to a different summer college each year and were accompanied by a female member of the London Gaelic League on each occasion. The holidays were financed by adult members of the London Gaelic League. At the same time, organisations within Ireland, particularly nationalist newspapers, began to host children's competitions, and the prizes on offer consisted of holidays in the Irish language summer colleges. Some school teachers also encouraged their pupils to attend Irish language summer colleges. By 1916, approximately 13,000 people had attended an Irish summer college, and 1,500 were in attendance on an annual basis. One estimation is that over 3,000 school teachers were among them, but this figure is likely to be quite conservative. Whatever the case, there were also students of every description and age, even down to quite small children. The Irish colleges were run independently of the Gaelic League, but as there was a large overlap in both organisations, the Irish colleges often espoused the ideology of the Gaelic League. The colleges organised classes every morning and afternoon, in which the language was taught to beginners, and more advanced students studied texts in Old and Middle Irish. Classes were held in the open air insofar as possible. Every evening there was entertainment such as a céilí, traditional music, or storytelling, which members of the local Irish-speaking communities would often attend. The idea was therefore to immerse the students in traditional Irish culture, which went hand in hand with the Irish language. Such a programme of events was deemed to be along cultural nationalist lines, a celebration of Irish culture, rather than espousing a more militant nationalism. As each Irish college was independently run, we can assume that the level of nationalist ideology and propaganda to which the students were exposed varied from college to college. All promoted cultural nationalist or native art forms and an appreciation of rural landscape. Newspaper reports about the Irish colleges gushed with enthusiasm and created a rose-tinted version of rural Ireland. In these reports, there was a constant juxtaposition between the moral and physical purity of the Irish-speaking environment and the contamination of the English-speaking world from which many of the students and teachers had come. A large part of their aim in promoting the rural landscape was to encourage more students and visitors to attend Irish colleges and to spend their money in the economically disadvantaged Irish-speaking areas. Some Irish colleges went further than promoting the Irish-speaking environment by espousing political and militant nationalism. Thus, it was common to find statements such as the following appearing in nationalist newspapers, and national newspapers even. The teachers and students attending the Irish colleges should come to the support of Irish Ireland. Their voice and support should be with us in the battle against West Britain. By 1914, targeted advertising was also used, with advertisements reflecting the type of nationalism embraced by the publication in which they appeared. In the Irish Volunteer, an advanced nationalist publication, for example, one Irish college promoted itself as an ideal spot to learn military tactics and to learn the Irish language, ample facilities for shooting. Indeed, the same issue of the Irish Volunteer stated that a corps of the volunteers had been formed in Ring Irish College, County Waterford. Another college in southeast Ulster advertised itself as a place where students could learn the language of Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn was a mythical Irish warrior who was increasingly becoming the symbol of a particularly masculine nationalism during the period leading up to the 1916 Rising and the War of Independence. The most insightful sources of information on the link between Irish colleges and growing nationalism during the first 2 decades of the 20th century are held within the Bureau of Military History collection 1913 to 1921, which is a collection of witness statements that were collected by the Irish state between 1947 and 1957 in order to gather primary source material for the revolutionary period in Ireland from 1913 to 1921. Even a quick look at the witness statements available in the Bureau of Military History provides a sense of the centrality of the Irish colleges to the recruitment and build-up of military nationalism in the lead up to 1916. For example, Micheál O'Drynon, a teacher in the Irish College in Spiddal, County Galway, and the captain of the Spiddal Company of the Irish Volunteers, recalled that in 1914, quote, "the first place of foot drill was given to us by P.H. Pearse himself on the grounds of the Irish College, Spiddal," unquote. Eamon Ceannt and his family stayed with the O'Drynon family in Spiddal for a month in the following summer of 1915. Pearse and Ceannt are significant because they were both deeply involved in the Easter Rising of 1916, and both were executed by the British government in the wake of the Rising. The fact that Pearse in particular was promoting foot drill in the Irish College and being allowed to do so in 1914 suggests that at least some students and teaching staff were already amenable to such displays of advanced nationalism. Of course, this display would also have impacted on other students and on the local community. At the very least, it would have made them more aware of the growing growth in nationalism. At most, they may have been further persuaded to participate therein. 17-year-old Sean O'Fwéileán, a future well-known short story writer who attended Ballingeary Irish College following the 1916 Rising, was of the opinion that, quote, "the language acted both as a matrix to the tissues of our political faith and as its sign and password. Our zeal to speak Irish bound us into a community, a new glowing persecuted or about to be persecuted political sect," unquote. It was no coincidence that companies of the Irish Volunteers and the women's organisation Cumann na mBan often came into being in the same locations as the Irish colleges. Indeed, one school teacher and member of the Irish Volunteers who attended Clachanili Irish College in Donegal in 1920, during the Irish War of Independence with Britain, refers to the fact that while learning Irish on holiday, he and the other volunteers were transferred to the local Clachanili company, the 1st Donegal Brigade. The 1st Donegal Brigade proceeded to ambush a Royal Irish Constabulary patrol. The Royal Irish Constabulary was the police force in Ireland while under British rule. This is not to say that all people involved in Irish colleges endorsed militant nationalism. There are plenty of examples of those who opposed it. At the same time, not everyone was aware of the nationalist fervour in the Irish colleges. The mother of 17-year-old Todd Andrews, who proceeded to become an influential politician, allowed him to attend Ring Irish College in County Waterford in the summer of 1918. Andrews later wrote, "Perhaps she thought I'd be out of political trouble for a while." Andrews claimed that Ring in 1918 was a microcosm of resurgent Ireland. "The people I met were of all ages, from children to grey beards, boys and girls, men and women from all over the southeast of the country." The importance of Ring Irish College within the nationalist tradition was abundantly clear. In the summer of 1918, the sons of some of the leaders of the Easter Rising of 1916, the leaders who had been executed, attended the college. By then, the Irish college experience was central to the educational formation of the nationalist elite. Another perspective on the nationalist sentiment that was embedded within those in the Irish college environment was provided by J.R.W. Goulden, son of a Royal Irish Constabulary sergeant who was stationed in Tourmakeedy Irish College in County Mayo during this period. Goulden later claimed in his adult years that, quote, the events of the Easter week scarcely changed our relationship with the local people, and the only hostility we ever experienced was during the summer months when the students attended the Irish College to study the Irish language. Many of the young people who came to Tourmakeedy hated the Royal Irish Constabulary and all that they stood for, and I feel that they influenced some of the people around against the abstract of foreign government rather than against the individuals who represented it, unquote. So Goulden here is making the point that I made earlier, that the local community were being influenced by the nationalist sentiment coming from those involved within the Irish colleges. Historian Roy Foster claims that for the revolutionary generation, Irish colleges were endlessly influential, and that, quote, the importance of such places lay in bringing together the like-minded and suggesting the possibility of a new way of life, unquote. Here, youthful romances were many, with both young men and women in attendance. The future Irish Taoiseach and President Eamon de Valera famously courted his future wife Sinead Ní Lanagáin while attending Irish College in the aforementioned Tourmakeedy, County Mayo. Important acquaintances were made in the Irish colleges between those who would shape Irish history during the first half of the 20th century. Young native speakers of Irish also attended the Irish colleges, with the aim of becoming language teachers. Some were self-funded, some received scholarships from the Gaelic League, while others received scholarships provided by individual colleges. One slightly older native Irish speaker who attended Cloughaneely College in Donegal through the college's own scholarship scheme was well-known writer Seamus O'Griana. In 1921, O'Griana published a novel called Mara Ráisín. The title of the book refers to two literary representations of Gaelic women, Black Rosaleen, who personified fettered Ireland in an old Irish language political ballad that was popular at the turn of the 20th century, and O'Griana's own Rosaleen, representative of the self-possessed modern Irish woman of the early 20th century. This novel is set in an Irish-speaking area with an Irish college as its central focus, and it progresses through the tumultuous period from around 1910 to 1916. Here we witness the conversion of the main character to militant nationalism over the course of several summers spent in an Irish college. Indeed, this character sacrifices himself for Ireland's freedom in 1916. O'Griana therefore replicates the sequence of events in Irish nationalist history and politics, events in which he himself became increasingly involved. In conclusion, during the early years of the Irish colleges, both young and old were in attendance. It can be difficult to parse the experience of the different age groups, particularly young people, as they were among the least likely to write of their experiences as they unfolded. Although the primary aim of the Irish College was to immerse students in the Irish language and culture, a militant nationalism soon wove itself into the fabric of the Irish colleges and influenced many students to participate in military manoeuvres. By the end of the First World War, there was an apparent shift in the focus of the Irish colleges as they tried to attract younger age groups, starting with children from the age of 8 or 9 and adolescents. Indeed, older children and adolescents were to be the target market of Irish summer colleges for the rest of the 20th century, apart from a brief spell in the 1920s when all national school teachers in the Free State were sent to Irish summer colleges to achieve a qualification in the Irish language. The advanced nationalism that existed within the colleges in the 1910s became less visible upon the establishment of the Irish Free State, although one or two Irish colleges are still known to engage in displays of nationalism. So while summer language colleges exist in many countries, the Irish Language Summer College is unique in the time span of its existence and in the number of teenagers that attend every year. One cultural commentator has summed up the experience as followed, quote, the Coláiste Saoirí, or Irish College, is a uniquely Irish cultural vehicle for the tortuous journey to adulthood. Stamped with the approval of parents and the rest of the establishment as a mind-improving linguistic experience, it is the first opportunity for thousands of Irish children every summer to flex their burgeoning independence in a controlled environment, unquote. Thank you very much.